As history often teaches us, sometimes human beings are the biggest monsters of all. Of course, when you join the ranks of the SCP Foundation, that starts to seem even less likely. And why wouldn't it? After all, just look at some of the creatures they encounter and keep in containment. A giant unkillable lizard, a being with toothy protrusions growing out of its body, a whole host of immortal eldritch beings that could destroy reality, and one sadistic old man who drags unsuspecting victims into his own personal hellscape. Monsters are a dime a dozen to the Foundation. Humanity could never be anywhere near as evil or as cruel as the real monsters, even on their worst day. Or at least, you'd think. Researcher Keltson had held much of the same mentality that the SCP Foundation had the job of defending humanity from the real monsters of the world. And it was because of that belief that he had never previously questioned the containment procedures in place for SCP-1000. These beings were a species of nocturnal and omnivorous apes, usually with bodies covered in either gray, brown, black, red, or white fur. Possessing the same level of intelligence as the common chimp, the SCP-1000s had been colloquially described as a species known as Bigfoot, linking them to the urban legend about an ape-like being of dubious existence. Keltson had hardly been surprised that Bigfoot itself was an anomalous SCP. There were already a number of others that the Foundation had encountered that seemed to have influenced popular folklore from different parts of the world. In fact, it was that unique subcategory of anomaly that Keltson was conducting research into when he came across the SCP-1000 files. He was trying to determine, in various cases, which came first, the anomaly or the legend. Did the existence of SCP-1000s inspire earlier human civilizations to pass on stories of the Sasquatch? Or had those word-of-mouth tales been somehow linked to the very origins of SCP-1000 themselves? Studying the files, Keltson knew there was a mimetic disease infecting hominids like SCP-1000. The infection meant that anyone who observed one of the Bigfoot creatures had, at minimum, a 2% chance of suffering instantaneous brain death. It would make discovering the link between the Sasquatch legend and SCP-1000 difficult, not being able to directly look at the apes. But Keltson hoped he wouldn't need to actually observe the creatures, only find evidence that proved which predated which, SCP-1000 or the legend of Bigfoot. The population of SCP-1000 was limited, although their highest concentrations were known to be found in the Pacific Northwest region of North America, as well as in the Himalayan mountain range in Asia. Being stationed at a Foundation facility in the US, researcher Keltson opted to mount an expedition to the former location. A few odd occurrences had taken place leading up to his departure. His car tires had been slashed and now needed repairing. Newspaper clippings were also left on Keltson's desk that told of various hikers' deaths taking place in the Pacific Northwest. A more paranoid person might interpret these as subtle, indirect threats. It certainly seemed as if someone in the SCP Foundation wasn't keen on Keltson departing for his research trip. Nevertheless, he changed tact and called in sick to work, sneaking away to a small airstrip and boarding a light cargo plane that smuggled him towards the forests of North America. Once he had arrived, night was already falling. Keltson was on his own, traversing the woods as the sun rapidly receded out of view behind the tree line, leaving the forest in darkness, save for the beam from his flashlight. The researcher was hardly an outdoorsy type and far from an expert at exploring the wilderness, but he pushed on into the heart of the woods, to the areas where the most sightings of SCP-1000 had been reported. It wasn't long before the torchlight fell over something imprinted in the woodland floor, a large footprint left by something bipedal and rather similar to an ape. Venturing further, the sound of twigs breaking caused Keltson to whirl around. The noise had come from nearby, making it louder than the low background ambience of the forest at night. He swung his flashlight in the direction he thought it had come from, only seeing the shadows of branches cast against the tree trunks. Then, another noise. Leaves rustling as something passed by, followed by more snapping of twigs, and the shaking of the leaves again. This thing, whatever it might have been, was encircling him. Frantically, Keltson tried to spot it with his light, when suddenly the beam fell over something tall, a hulking figure moving between the trees. Even from that split-second sighting, it was clearly an instance of SCP-1000. The momentary glimpse had reminded the intrepid researcher of an important detail. He couldn't look at them. A 2% chance of instant brain death seemed too low to worry about. But Kelton's research had described the effects of the mimetic disease to be cumulative. The longer an SCP-1000 ape was observed, the higher the chance of being killed on the spot by the infection. Snapping his eyes shut as tight as he could, Kelton was frozen to the spot, at the mercy of the sounds surrounding him. The SCP-1000 was drawing closer, enough for the researcher to detect its footsteps. His pulse quickened, along with his breathing to match. Although he was already aware that the apes weren't known for being aggressive, hearing its heavy breathing as it drew nearer was enough to make him uncertain. Kelton wasn't sure if the Bigfoot would attack him or pass him by, but by far the last thing he had expected was to hear it start speaking. "You, man," came a deep, gravelly voice. It was the kind of sound an animal makes that can almost be mistaken for speech. Kelton wasn't fully convinced it had been a word, rather just his ears playing tricks on him in a moment of heightened fear. "Human," it repeated much clearer. There was no mistaking it a second time. The SCP-1000 had spoken. You can talk?" Kelton exclaimed in disbelief. The Sasquatch didn't answer directly. Instead, the researcher detected the sound of receding footsteps. There was a pause as the SCP-1000 ape turned back to Kelton. "Follow, human," it said. "Open your eyes and follow me." What about the disease?" Kelton shouted, keeping his eyelids still screwed shut. "You'll be safe," the ape replied, before it resumed walking away. Cautiously opening his eyes and lifting his flashlight, Kelton could see the hairy figure making its way through the forest, its back turned to him. He could see it. The researcher could look directly at it, and yet nothing seemed to be happening. No adverse side effects, no instant brain death. The odds were low, Kelton reminded himself, as he began to warily follow the path of the ape. Following at a distance, he made sure to momentarily glance away, trying not to stare for too long at the SCP-1000 creature, in the hope that might disrupt the mimetic effect of the infection. Before long, they had arrived at a cave deep in the heart of the forest. The embers of a small fire were still aglow near the rocky entrance. As they lumbered inside, the SCP-1000 threw extra wood on the fire, poking it with a long stick until the flames began to reach higher. The flickering orange gave Kelton a better look at the ape. Its large frame covered almost head to toe in brown fur. There was also something about the creature that seemed off. Not unsettling, but almost sad, melancholic, like it was lonely. The researcher had been so amazed that he could observe the creature for so long without dying that he'd barely focused in on the more important discovery. SCP-1000s were far more intelligent than the Foundation files had indicated, capable of not only speech, but emotion, too. Do you have a name?" Kelton stammered, unsure where to start. "Grykor," it replied. "That is my name." "Yeah, you'll have to forgive me. I'm a little taken aback by all this," the researcher hastily explained. "You're able to articulate. Your species is advanced enough to have names." "Why should that be surprising?" Grykor asked. Well, it's just the Foundation seems to think you and your kind are, I don't mean any offense, but mindless beasts." The ape made a huffing, exhaling sound. Kelton noticed after a moment that they were chuckling, a dry, almost sarcastic chuckle. It was unlike anything he had expected to learn about SCP-1000. That reminded him of why he'd come here. Grykor, may I ask something?" He cleared his throat. Nodding, the SCP-1000 instance poked at the fire again, paying little mind to the human in its company. "Where did you and your people come from?" Kelton asked. What's your history?" "Why?" Grykor replied abruptly. You see, humans have these legends, stories about something called Bigfoot or Sasquatch. The Foundation, the humans I work with, they call you one and the same. I wanted to know if that was true." For a short moment, the creature paused. Then Grykor began to give Kelton the truth, the real truth. And as they spoke, it was as if the researcher could see the story unfolding, emphasized by the pain in the ape's teary eyes. "We were like you, long, long ago," it began explaining. "We and humans, we evolved together side by side. For a time there was peace between us. But we began to grow faster, stronger, became smarter while you were left behind. You evolved before early humans did? Kelton probed. Indeed, Gregor answered with a gentle nod. We began to surpass the humans. You were still young, still hunting and foraging for food, while we were moving far beyond. Thousands and thousands of years, we were able to develop our culture, our technology, all before the humans had even come close to fire and the wheel.
But that doesn't make any sense, the researcher interjected yet again. If that was the case, mankind would have never had its chance to reach the top of the food chain. We would have died out, and that would have made you the dominant species on the planet.
We were, the SCP-1000 ape replied. For a time.
What happened?
Gregor turned with a solemn look on their face. You, it replied plainly. Humans happened. We covered the world. Billions and billions of us. You were rare, as few as we are now. My people made technology far beyond anything humans have dreamt up, either before or since. Trains, ships, vehicles created from the trees and the animals. Communication using parts of insects and smaller creatures. Cities filled with us, where we lived in harmony, stretched out across parts of worlds humans dared not tread.
Organic technology, Kelton gasped. Fascinating.
We had weapons too, and that was our biggest mistake.
What kind of weapons? The researcher quizzed the ape. Given how advanced you were compared to humanity at that time, I'm assuming your weaponry was far beyond our early spears and clubs.
The devastating kind, Gregor said, staring ahead into the fire, almost if the dancing flames conjured up images of the kind of destruction his ancestors' weapons could cause.
I think I understand, Kelton said. There was some kind of conflict, yes? A majority of your people perished? Oh, my condolences. That would have removed you from the top of the evolutionary chain and allowed the earliest ancestors of humanity to usurp your place there? Was the disease you and your species carried a result of the war? A sort of lingering radioactive fallout, but on a genetic level?
We are not sick,
Gregor growled.
Your people lied. They made that up, and there was no war. It was a slaughter.
Kelton fell quiet, unsure of what to say.
Humans would stay away from us back then. We avoided them too. You slept during the night when we were awake, but you made a deal. A deal with something ancient and dangerous in the forests. A deal to even the score. You found our weapons and didn't hesitate.
No, that's...
The Foundation researcher tried to protest, but the look of sadness on the ape's face stopped his sentence before he could finish.
We were almost entirely wiped out in a single day. Humans switched places with us. We became less, and they became more. They used our technology to forget about us, wiped our memories, so they wouldn't have to face up what they had done. But we will never forget.
And the Foundation, they maintain that facade, Kelton realized. That's why they tell us you're infected, that if we look at you, we'll die. They're ashamed. We all should be.
Not just ashamed,
Gregor replied.
Afraid. They fear we want revenge, retribution for what was done to our people.
And do you?
The ape took another pause, as if it was pondering, or just allowing itself a moment to feel sad. We have forgiven you, it answered.
I'm not sure we deserve that,
Kelton said back, as the pair sat by the fire until the sun came up.
Now go and check out SCP-323 Wendigo Skull and SCP-023 Black Shuck for more anomalous entities that are pulled straight out of folklore, myths, and ancient legends.